Welcome to the Scroll Ensemble Classical Music Improvisation channel. I'm Robert. As you might know, I teach historical improvisation at the Conservatory of The Hague, and one of the cool things at this school is that a teacher, if selected, can do a paid research project. So this year I was one of the chosen ones with my project Potpourri as a gateway drug to classical music improvisation. If you have been following my channel for a while, you will know that my personal focus in improvisation has been on historical improvisation and especially lots of stuff between 1600 and 1800. We also used to do lots of earlier stuff in concerts with the ensemble, but later styles are still a new thing to me, but also very exciting. So recently I've become very interested in 19th century improvisation approaches and especially how these could be used on melodic instruments. As you may have seen in a recent video, this one here, you may have realized that I looked at around 250 19th century method books for a vast array of instruments to look for improvisation information. And this is linked also to a wonderful lecture of almost 3 hours that you can look at our Patreon. I collected a lot of data, but it still takes a lot of time to learn to actually do this on my instrument. So my next step will be to learn to improvise a potpourri. The potpourri is one of the improvisation genres mentioned in Czerny's fabulous systematic method for fantasizing. And also here, if you want to know more about this method, you can watch our flagship video, which has been watched almost 15,000 times now. Surprisingly, not so much other research has been done in this area. Several musicians have researched improvisation for flute or violin specifically, but especially preludes, cadenzas, and the simpler parts of improvising. Or researchers looked at the improvisation of preludes specifically, like at one form, but again, not really going into very fantastical forms. And so I think the potpourri will be both interesting for me, but also for the world at large, where this kind of research has not been done so much yet. Before I tell you more about how I want to approach this, it might be useful to know what a potpourri is. Well, this is very simple. It's basically a collection of well-known themes with some variations. You could add more stuff, but it could be almost as simple as what you see here. Those two little beautiful blocks. And this is why I chose the potpourri, of course. It is a vehicle for the synthesis of all kinds of possible improvisation forms, and yet the overall form is always very clear. So the simplest form could consist of two different famous melodies, like here, with some variations. Then you could add a bridge to that, because of course, if you just go directly, it is possible, but it's nicer to add a bridge to that. So that's it. But you could do much more with it, which makes it super modular and adaptable to the attention span of your audience. You could add some motifs of melody A or melody B, or both, to your bridge. But you could also add a cadenza, perhaps a prelude in front, which could even be a slightly more complicated fantasia on a theme or motive from one of the melodies. You could also add some bigger finish or just some virtuosic flourishes at the end that are not necessarily part of the melody. Of course, you could also add little fugues, quodlibets, more melodies and variations, etc. On top of that, Czerny says this is the best form for larger audiences, especially if they don't know you very well. So after all that background information, I will now tell you more about the actual project. There are 3 parts of the research. I want to use this 19th century improvisatory form to improve my own improvisations, so that's number 1. Then I want to research the usage of this form as a vehicle to introduce any musician from any style to classical music improvisation, so for a teaching pedagogy. And 3, I want to research the usage of the potpourri in concerts to connect to my audiences. And all of these elements will, of course, be featuring in the coming year on the channel. So first, I need to learn to compose and improvise potpourri. I will take some time to put into practice the ideas I've collected over the last 2 years, learning about preludes, harmonies, modulation, all of that, motives, but really on the instrument. On top of that, I want to practice being able to do that on a 19th century oboe, which adds all kinds of extra keys, reeds and technical practice to the list. I will also analyze the Potpourri Czerny printed in his improvisation book, and then look for samples of such potpourri for wind instruments. Ideally in totally solo form without accompaniment, because that's also the easiest for concerts. But, well, let's see what we can find, because I've only found one for clarinet so far. So if you know about more of those, please do let me know, for example, in the comments, or just write to me. Another important aspect is memory. So when doing this in front of an audience, I should at the very least have a vast knowledge of well-known melodies, songs, anthems, etc. And this is also what Czerny mentions in his book. I should also mention this is not really my strong suit, so some training there will definitely be necessary. James seems to be looking at memory as well in his research, so hopefully he can help me there. On top of that, I would like to be able to grasp a melody from the audience quickly as well, so that when I'm performing, I could ask them, what melody would you like me to do that on? If they say this melody and I don't know it, I would love for them to be able to sing it and for me to get it into my head and then improvise on top of that right there and then. Finally, Czerny mentions another very interesting aspect, namely learning to read the audience. As a potpourri is really an audience-based improvisation, you have to keep track of their attention span. Step 2, teaching. From the potpourri diagram at the beginning of the video, it might already be clear to you that it could be a very interesting approach to teaching classical music improvisation as well. So recently I also came across this book here, Corey's Original System of Preluding, in which he advocates the memorization of little building blocks, which you can then combine in various ways. So for instance, you might have a basic little chord progression and vary that. Then you can add to that a little coda, but you could also add to that a capo, to which then you could add a coda as well. And then you could replace this chord with another capo or coda, etc., etc. So the simplest form to teach could be to take two melodies. Melody 1 is then just played and the student can look at it and then do a simple variation with character and rhythm. And in my experience, most students can do that right away. Then we can learn a little bridge, which could be something like this, or for less able students, it could even be just a little scale. But in any case, a little block, a little piece of knowledge that I will first teach them, and they can just use in the moment immediately without much change. Then we can move on to our second melody and add yet another variation to that with rhythm and or character. And this is already a little proto-potpourri. Now, of course, we can start building. We can add some motivic material to the bridge or a little modulation. We can add a small prelude, more variations, more melodies, etc., etc. But what I like here is that from the get-go, the student can already do a 2-minute improvisation without too much effort, which hopefully will sound nice if simple. It also includes so many static, known elements already that the style is basically, per definition, classical. So even people coming from other styles that often have many questions of like, what am I actually allowed to do? I can circumvent this now by kind of baking that into the form and then slowly adding more ideas to that. Finally, I want to research how the audience would react to this. So I've always thought that improvisation in classical music is a way to draw audiences in that perhaps initially would be less interested to be more interested in the classical music world. And I think especially when a potpourri uses themes known to the audience now, like, you know, in some cases, maybe even pop music or film music, it can combine the beauty of classical music forms, approaches, variations, motives with themes that the audience can really relate to. And Czerny even suggests that you can play with the words of different songs that people know. So by bringing together particular texts, you could bring an extra meaning to the potpourri, which people only would be able to understand if they knew the songs well enough. So I imagine this could bring back that connection between the performer and the audience, which was much more intimate and based on more shared knowledge in the 19th century. Well, at least I think so. But is that actually the case? So I wanted to research this by doing some mini concerts in which I play a written 19th century potpourri from that time, then a pre-composed potpourri by me with more contemporary themes, or at least themes I think people now would be interested in and would know, and then improvise a potpourri in the moment using themes the audience suggests right then and there, hopefully some of which I will already know, and then see how the different audiences would react to these different potpourri, basically. My dream would be to have some kind of app running along the concerts where the audiences can directly react. So then afterwards, I can compare timestamps in the recording with their reactions in the app. And also perhaps by using, for instance, smileys and stuff, they could react quite quickly in some moments, or with hearts or whatever. And then, of course, if they wanted to write something more, they could. But if it were only writing or written on paper, for example, I feel that would take quite some time and the attention would go away. But, well, I will research this much more in the coming time and also ask people with more knowledge about this. But if you have any experience with this or ideas for me, please do let me know, because I would love to hear about them. So thanks so much for your attention so far. I hope it was interesting for you to find out more about my research and some of the things that will be coming on this channel this coming year. Leave a thumbs up, some comments, etc., etc. Subscribe, share, follow, notification bell, all of that stuff. That all helps. Oh yeah, and of course, if you can, do support us on Patreon. Thanks to our Patreons for all their help so far. You are, for example, this month keeping up our website.